I made a video message for my grandchildren to watch after I'm gone. My daughter-in-law found it on my desk, deleted it, and said, "No need for them to carry your regrets." My son said, "She's just trying to protect them." What she didn't know was that a copy had already been sent, and when it played on the big screen at the family gathering. I sat very still in that chair after Elise walked out of the room, and I want you to understand something about stillness. When you are 78 years old and your body has started its slow negotiation with the end of things, stillness is not always peace. Sometimes it is the opposite. Sometimes it is the feeling of every mistake you ever made settling into your bones like cold water, and you just sit there absorbing it because there is nowhere left to run. That is what I felt when Elise held up that small black USB drive between her fingers like it was something dirty she had found under the furniture, and I watched her walk to my desk and erase everything on it with a few sharp, satisfied clicks. I am Harold Bennett. I am 78 years old. I have spent most of my life being a man who is better at being silent than at being present, and I have paid for that in ways I am only now beginning to fully count. My flaw, if I had to name just one, though there were many, was pride wrapped around cowardice. I called it restraint. I called it strength. I told myself that men of my generation did not spill their feelings onto other people like a broken pipe flooding a basement. What I never admitted, not even to myself until recently, was that I was simply afraid. Afraid that if I said what I truly felt, the people I loved would see how much I had failed them and they would agree. So I stayed quiet. Year after year, decade after decade, I stayed quiet. And the quiet had a cost I could not fully calculate until I was staring at a diagnosis that had the word terminal in it. And suddenly all those unspoken things started pressing against the inside of my chest like something trying to get out. I made the video 3 weeks before the family gathering. I sat in front of my laptop in the small office off the hallway, and I spoke for 41 minutes into the camera. I said things I had never said to any living person. I talked about Daniel, my son, who was 48 years old and had my same jaw and my same tendency toward silence, and how I had shaped that in him without ever meaning to. I talked about the birthdays I had missed, the school plays where my seat was empty, the times Daniel had looked at me as a boy with something hopeful in his eyes and I had looked away because I did not know how to receive that kind of open, wanting love. I talked about his mother, my wife Margaret, who had died 11 years ago and who had always been the translator between my heart and my family, and how after she was gone I had not learned to speak for myself, I had simply gone mute. I talked about my grandchildren Mia and Lucas, who were 14 and 11 respectively and who deserved to know that their grandfather had seen them, had loved them, had just been tragically bad at showing it. I cried twice. I apologized more times than I could count, and when it was done I felt something shift inside me like a door opening in a room that had been sealed for years. Then Elise walked in. Elise was my daughter-in-law Daniel's wife, 45 years old, and she had a way of moving through a house like she owned the architecture of it. She was not a cruel woman. I want to be careful about that because the story is easier if the antagonist is simply a villain, but real life does not work that cleanly. Elise was a woman who loved her family with a fierceness that had calcified over the years into something controlling. She had grown up with a father who had subjected his children to his emotional chaos, his crying jags and his angry confessions and his desperate late-night conversations about his regrets, and she had decided early on that her children would be protected from that kind of weight. She had confused protection with control. She had confused shielding people with deciding for them. And when she walked into my office that afternoon and saw the USB drive on my desk and asked what it was, and I told her it was a message for the grandchildren for after I was gone, her face went through something complicated before it settled on that controlled disgust. "Why would you even make something like this?" Her voice was steady but barely. "It's not for you," I said. "It's for them after I'm gone." "Well, they don't need it." She walked to the desk. I watched her plug it in. "Elise, please, no need for them to carry your regrets, Harold." Click, click, gone. Daniel had appeared in the doorway. I had not even heard him come down the hall. He was leaning against the frame with his arms crossed, his face doing that careful blank thing it always did when he was caught between two people he did not know how to choose between. "Dad," he said, "she's just trying to protect them." Protect them. I looked at my son for a long moment. He was 48 years old and there were lines around his eyes that had not been there even 5 years ago. And I thought about how many of those lines I had put there with my silence, my absence, my inability to simply say the things a father is supposed to say. "All right," I said. And that was all I said. Because what neither of them knew, what Elise could not have known when she pressed that delete button with such calm authority, was that the USB drive she had just erased was not the original. It was a copy I had made specifically to leave sitting on my desk, knowing that she often came into my office when she thought I was resting, knowing that she read my mail and checked my desk, and managed the information flow of this family like an air traffic controller managing the flight paths of everyone she loved. I had anticipated her. For the first time in my life, my pride had not made me simply dig in and defend myself. It had made me think 3 steps ahead. The real video had been uploaded to a private link 2 days earlier. It was scheduled for delivery, and not just delivery to my grandchildren through email, which Elise would eventually intercept or monitor. I had gone further than that because my flaw, that same pride, that same stubbornness, had pushed me past the simple solution into something more elaborate than was perhaps wise. The family gathering was 9 days away. The event organizer, a pleasant young woman in her 30s named Petra who worked for the venue where Daniel hosted the annual Bennett family dinner every year, had already received my email requesting a small addition to the evening's program. A family tribute, I had called it. A short video, nothing dramatic, just something sentimental from an old man who wanted to mark the occasion. She had written back within hours. Of course. Mr. Bennett, we would be honored. Lovely idea. In the days that followed, I watched my family move around me with a new quality of attention. I had been a watcher my whole life, but before I had watched from behind the glass of my own remoteness, cataloging what I saw without fully participating. Now I watched differently. I watched Mia at the dinner table, the way she read the emotional temperature of a room before she said anything, the way her eyes moved from face to face, gathering information. She was 14 and already wiser than I had been at 40. I watched Lucas, who was quieter and more internal than his sister, who built elaborate structures with whatever materials were nearby, sugar packets, coasters, napkins, while the adults talked around him, not quite ignoring him but not quite including him either. I watched Daniel, who was kind to his children in small, consistent ways that I had never managed, who touched his wife's arm when she was tense, who remembered what people said and followed up on it later. He had become a better version of what I might have been, and that was something. I told myself, that was something. But I also watched the way Daniel deferred to Elise in everything, the way her preferences organized the household's reality. The way she decided what the children watched, what they discussed, who they spent time with, and now what their grandfather was permitted to say to them. I was not angry at her, or rather I was, but underneath the anger was something sadder, which was recognition. I had done the same thing, only in reverse. She imposed through control, I had imposed through absence. Both of us had decided without asking what our family needed and then given them that instead of giving them ourselves. My health slid a little during those 9 days. That was not manipulation, it was simply what was happening. I tired more easily. I repeated myself once at dinner in a way that made Mia look at me with soft, careful eyes, and I excused myself early and sat in my room feeling the specific humiliation of a mind that is beginning to slip and knows it. I almost canceled the plan. That is the honest truth of it. I sat with my phone in my hand at 2 in the morning 3 days before the gathering, and I thought about sending Petra an email saying never mind, just skip the tribute. The old man changed his mind. Because Elise's voice was in my head. Was this selfish? Was this the same thing Margaret had always gently tried to tell me, that my version of doing the right thing always had a flavor of my own needs in it? Was this video actually for my grandchildren, or was it for me? Was I trying to give them something, or just trying to finally be seen, finally be forgiven, finally put down a weight I had been carrying for decades and hand it to a room full of people who had not asked to receive it? I sat with that question for most of the night, and what I came back to again and again was something I had seen in Mia's face the last time I had tried awkwardly to tell her I was proud of her. I had not said it well. I had said something about her report card. And she had looked at me with this flicker of something wanting more, knowing she would not get it, and then she had smiled politely and said thank you and gone back to her room. That flicker. That was what I came back to. I kept the plan. The morning of the gathering I woke early and sat at the window in my room watching the light change over the backyard, and I felt the specific terror of a man who is about to tell the truth in front of people. It is different from ordinary nervousness. It is the feeling of standing at the edge of something you cannot take back. I had spent my entire life not standing at that edge. I had always stepped back, always found a reason to wait, always told myself there would be another opportunity, a better moment, a time when the words would come more easily and the feelings would be less raw and the risk would somehow be smaller. And then I ran out of time. Or rather, time made itself visible to me in a way I could no longer ignore, and I understood finally that there is no better moment. There is only this moment and the choice of whether to use it. Elise was in good spirits that morning. She had arranged everything beautifully. The gathering was 40-some relatives at the venue hall, a place Daniel used every year, long tables and warm lighting and the kind of organized warmth that Elise was genuinely gifted at creating. She had ordered a cake. She had made a seating chart. She had printed small cards with everyone's name on them and arranged them at the places. She hugged me when I arrived and said I looked well, and I thanked her, and we were both perfectly pleasant to each other in the way of two people who have reached a kind of armed truce. You seem chipper, Daniel said, catching me at the drinks table early in the evening. Do I? I said. You do. Usually at these things you find a corner and sit in it. Maybe I'm turning over a new leaf. He gave me a look that was half suspicious and half something more open, a wondering look. Is everything all right with you, Dad? The health stuff, the doctors said. I'm fine, I said, which was not entirely true but was true enough for that moment. I'm exactly where I need to be. Dinner stretched over 2 hours. The food was good, the conversation was loud and layered and overlapping the way large family gatherings are. And I ate more than I had in weeks and felt something close to happiness sitting at that table surrounded by all of these people who shared my blood and my history, and who I had, for most of my life, held at arm's length because I did not know how to do anything else. Mia sat across from me and we talked about a book she was reading, a real conversation better than I had managed with her in years, and I thought, this is what it could have always been. This is what I threw away. And then Petra, the event organizer, moved quietly to the front of the room and dimmed the lights just slightly, and in a pleasant professional voice said, "At this time we have a special tribute prepared by the Bennett family." Elise looked up from her conversation. A small, pleasant smile appeared on her face. The kind of smile you give when you expect something mild and agreeable. Daniel glanced at me. I looked at my hands on the table. The screen at the front of the room flickered on, and there I was. I had not seen the video since I recorded it, and watching yourself on a screen in a room full of 40 people is a particular and strange experience. The man on the screen looked older than I felt, or maybe exactly as old as I felt, and he was sitting very still with his hands folded and his face open in a way that Harold Bennett's face was almost never open. "If you're watching this," the recorded version of me began, and his voice was unsteady in a way that made several people in the room immediately put down their forks. "Then I've run out of time to say things properly." The sound in the room changed. The ambient murmur of conversation dissolved into something alert and uncertain. "Who is that?" someone said. "That's Harold," someone else said quietly. Elise's smile did not disappear so much as freeze. She turned slowly to look at me. I met her eyes. "What is this?" she said, low and sharp. "It's a video," I said. "Harold," her voice was a warning. "Let it play," I said. She looked at Daniel. Daniel was staring at the screen. On the screen I was talking about the early years. I was talking about a man who had grown up in a house where emotion was treated like weakness, where his own father had communicated primarily through silence and expectation, where love was demonstrated through provision, food, shelter, education, rather than presence or words. I was talking about how I had taken all of that and carried it forward without ever questioning it, had built my family around the same architecture of withheld feeling, and had watched my son grow up reaching for something I did not know how to give. "Dad," Daniel said. His voice was strange. He said it again. "Dad." "He can't hear you," Mia said gently. She was watching the screen with an expression of complete, focused attention, and there was no distress in her face, only a kind of concentrated openness, like someone listening to music they had never heard before. On the screen I was apologizing, not in the vague, armored way I had sometimes managed in life, the "sorry if you felt that way," the "I did the best I could," the "sorry you're upset." I was apologizing specifically. I named the birthday I had missed when Daniel was 9 because of a work trip that had not been strictly necessary. I named the school play. I named the silence at Margaret's funeral when Daniel had looked at me, and I had not been able to put my arm around him because something inside me had locked up the way it always did when things were too real. I named the years after the diagnosis when I had retreated further into myself, instead of running toward the people I had left to run toward. "Stop it!" Elise's voice was controlled, but her hands on the table were not. "Someone turn it off." Nobody moved. "Daniel," she said, "turn it off." Daniel did not move. He was crying. He was not making any noise, but there were tears running freely down his face, and I had not seen my son cry since he was 8 years old, and seeing it now felt like something cracking open in my chest that had been fused shut for decades. "Daniel," Elise's voice cracked slightly. "This isn't appropriate." "Not here, not in front of Elise." Daniel's voice was very quiet. "Please." She stopped. On the screen the version of me that had been recorded 3 weeks ago was saying, "To your parents I leave this truth. Shielding children from pain doesn't protect them. It teaches them silence, and silence is where regret grows." The room was absolutely still. Elise sat with her spine very straight and her eyes fixed on the tablecloth and her jaw tight. She was a composed woman. She did not fall apart in public, but her hands were shaking. I could see them from where I sat. The video continued for another 12 minutes. It spoke about Mia and Lucas, not burdening them with adult regrets but speaking directly to them as real people, acknowledging who they were, what I had noticed about them, and the small observations of a grandfather who had watched from too far away for too long. I told Mia that her empathy was the most remarkable thing about her and that it would take her anywhere she needed to go if she trusted it. I told Lucas that his quietness was not a flaw, it was a kind of depth, and that the world needed people who built things carefully instead of people who just talked about building. When the screen went dark, the silence lasted a long time. It was Daniel who moved first. He pushed his chair back and stood up and walked around the table to where I was sitting, and he just stood there for a moment looking at me. His face was doing things I had never seen Harold Bennett's son's face do. "You felt all that," he said. "You felt all of it, and you never said it." My throat was tight. "I'm saying it now." "Now," he said, and there was something in the word that was not quite anger and not quite grief. Now when he stopped, he could not say the word either. Neither of us could say it. "I know," I said. "I know, Daniel." He sat down beside me, which was not something he would have done an hour ago. He sat in Mia's vacated chair and he put his forearms on the table and stared at them, and we sat in silence that was, for the first time in my memory, a comfortable silence. A chosen one rather than a default one. Elise found her voice. "This wasn't your decision to make," she said. Her voice was still controlled, but there was something wounded underneath it now. "You decided to stand up in front of our entire family, and no," Daniel said. He did not raise his voice, he just said it. "Elise, no. He ambushed us. He told the truth," Daniel said, "in front of our children without asking." "Elise." Daniel turned to look at her. His voice was not angry, it was something calmer and more final than anger. "My father is dying. He made a video. You deleted it." "He found another way." A long silence. That's not fair, Elise said. Her voice was smaller now. I was trying to protect them. I know, Daniel said, but maybe they didn't need to be protected from this. Mia appeared beside me then, sliding into the chair on my other side, and she put her hand over mine on the table. She was 14 years old and she had her grandmother Margaret's eyes, and she looked at me with an expression that I had been waiting 78 years to receive and did not know until this moment that I had been waiting for it. Grandpa, she said, I'm glad you told us. I could not speak for a moment. Even the hard parts I managed. Especially those, she said. Lucas appeared on Elise's side of the table. He was not a demonstrative child, never had been, but he leaned against his mother's arm and looked at me across the table and said, I liked the part about building things carefully. And just like that, something that had been frozen in me for a very long time was not frozen anymore. The rest of the gathering moved around us in a kind of comfortable chaos. Some relatives came to speak to me quietly, an aunt who said it was the bravest thing she had ever seen, two cousins who were clearly uncomfortable and did not know what to say and said almost nothing. One of Daniel's brothers-in-law made a joke that landed badly and received looks that made him stop making it. Elise spent an hour near the dessert table talking to her sister, her back to the room. Her posture radiating a careful composure that I recognized because it was the same composure I had worn for most of my life. The armor of a person who has been surprised and has not yet decided how to respond. I watched her and felt something I had not expected to feel, not satisfaction. I want to be honest about that. When I had made the plan, when I had arranged the scheduled delivery and contacted Petra, and thought 3 steps ahead of Elise's controlling instincts, there had been something in me that was not entirely gentle. Some part of me had wanted her to feel the thing she had done when she pressed that delete button so calmly, so certainly, so sure that she knew better. Some part of me had wanted her to sit in front of 40 people and feel the ground shift under her authority. And that part of me, the prideful, stubborn, impulsive part that had caused no small amount of damage in my life, had gotten exactly what it wanted. And looking at her now, standing with her back to the room and her shoulders held too carefully, I felt the mix of things that is more honest than triumph. I felt relief. I felt grief. I felt the particular weariness of a person who has done something that cannot be undone, and is now sitting with all of its consequences, not just the satisfying ones. Daniel drove me home that night. We did not talk much, but the quiet was different. At the door of my house he stopped with his hand on my shoulder, which was not a thing that had happened in probably 30 years, and he looked at me and said, You could have told me before, you could have just told me. I know, I said, why didn't you? I thought about it. Because saying it to you meant you could respond, and I was terrified of what you would say. He nodded slowly. He squeezed my shoulder once. I would have said that I already knew most of it, he said, and that I forgave you a long time ago. I just needed you to ask. I stood at my front door for a long time after his car left, with that sentence sitting in my chest like a stone that had turned out not to be a stone at all but something warmer, something that had mass but also gave off heat. He had already forgiven me. He had been carrying the forgiveness around for years, waiting for me to reach out and take it, and I had been too proud and too afraid to reach. That was the thing that broke me, standing at my own front door at 11 o'clock at night with the autumn air cold on my face. Not the video, not the gathering, not even Elise's fractured composure or my grandchildren's open arms. It was Daniel saying he had already forgiven me, because it meant the silence had not been necessary. It had never been necessary. All those years of armor and distance and hoarded words, none of it had been protecting anything except my own fear of being truly known by the people I loved most. In the weeks that followed, things shifted in small and large ways. Daniel called me more, not long calls, not elaborate emotional conversations, but calls. How are you feeling? How was your appointment? Mia started sending me pictures of books she was reading with notes about what she thought of them. Lucas sent me a photograph of something he had built out of sticks and rubber bands in the backyard with a caption that said building carefully. Elise was harder. She did not call. When Daniel brought the children to visit, she came with them but moved through my house with the careful, measured quality of a woman who had not yet decided how to feel about what had happened and was not willing to perform a feeling she did not have. I respected that, actually. It was the most honest thing I had seen her do. About 3 weeks after the gathering, she and I were alone in my kitchen for perhaps 10 minutes while Daniel took the children to the backyard. She was making tea. I was sitting at the table. The silence was not comfortable exactly, but it was honest. I did delete it, she said finally. She did not look at me. She was watching the kettle. I know, I said. I thought I was doing the right thing. I know that too. I still think. She stopped. Started again. I still think there were other ways to handle it. You might be right, I said. She turned then and looked at me. Her expression was complicated. You outmaneuvered me, she said. There was something almost wry in it, almost reluctant. I did, I said. It wasn't kind. No, I agreed. It wasn't entirely kind. I had reasons that mattered to me, but the way I did it, I paused. I let my stubbornness run the plan. I should have talked to Daniel first. I should have tried harder to go through proper channels. I took a shortcut that humiliated you in front of our family, and that was not. I stopped. I had been about to say it was not the right thing to do, but that was not quite honest either. It was not entirely the right thing to do, I said, even if some of what came from it was right. She stood with the kettle in her hand for a moment, then she said, the children are fine, in case you were wondering, they're not burdened. Mia talks about it more than Lucas does, but she paused. They're fine. I'm glad, I said. She set down the kettle and sat across from me at the table. It was the first time in perhaps years that we had sat across from each other without Daniel as a buffer. I do it because I love them, she said. I know, I said. So did I said, in my own inadequate way for 50 years. She looked at me and for a moment I could see, underneath the composure and the control and the architectural management of everything around her, the same thing I had always carried. Fear. She was afraid. Different fear than mine from a different wound, but the same basic human terror of the people you love being hurt and not being able to stop it. We're not so different, I said. She made a sound that might have been a laugh. Don't push it, she said, but something had eased. Something between us had moved, like furniture that had been in the same place so long you forget it can be moved, and then someone shifts it and suddenly the room has more light. I am writing this, or rather dictating it, because my hands have not been reliable for some weeks now in the small office off the hallway where I recorded the video. I am not sure how much longer I have. The doctors use words like comfortable and quality of life and making the most of the time, which are all ways of saying the arithmetic has been done and the sum is not large. I have thought a great deal about what I did, about the plan I made and the way I executed it, about my flaws and how they shaped even my attempt at honesty. The truth is that my stubbornness served me in the end, but it also cost something. If I had been a less prideful man, I might have simply said to Daniel, Elise erased my video, I want to find another way to give it to the grandchildren. Can you help me? And Daniel, who apparently had been carrying forgiveness around for years just waiting for me to ask, might have said yes, let's figure it out together, and the whole thing might have unfolded with less collateral drama. But I was not a less prideful man. I was exactly the man I was, with all of his particular damage and particular strength, and I had done what that man would do. I outmaneuvered, I planned, I got my 3 steps ahead. And in doing so I had given my grandchildren something real, and I had broken some silence that needed to be broken, and I had also left Elise with a wound that was healing but would take time, and I had to hold all of those things together without pretending any of them were not true. The revenge, if that is the right word for it, and I am not entirely sure it is, was not clean. Real things rarely are. Real things are mixed and complicated, and they leave marks on everyone, including the person who thought they were the one in control. What I know is this: Mia called me last week and we talked for 40 minutes about nothing in particular, and at the end she said, I love you, Grandpa, and I said, I love you too, Mia, and neither of us said it awkwardly or like we were reading from a script we had never practiced. We said it the way people say it when they mean it, and they know the other person knows they mean it. And Lucas sent me a photograph yesterday of an elaborate structure he had built out of popsicle sticks and a rubber band and a small piece of wood that he said was a catapult for launching grapes across the kitchen. He had captioned it, building carefully, launching anyway. I had laughed out loud, actual laughing out loud, not the polite variation, for the first time in months. The silence is broken now. It turns out that was the only revenge that ever really mattered. Not humiliating Elise, not outmaneuvering her careful control, not being seen as the one who was right. The only thing that mattered was the breaking of the silence. I just wish I had not needed a deadline to do it.